The King's Avatar, Chapter 1276. Behind You. Audio source, wuxia-world-audiobook.com. Chapter 1276. Behind You. Translator, Gnome Yummy. Editor, Gnome Yummy. Happy progressed one level further in the group arena. It seemed that Feng Rui had achieved these two victories very easily, so easily that it was almost scary. After two battles, Boundless Sea had only lost 17% of his health. This was the pace to a 1v3. The crowd took a while to process this, but when Wind Howl's Lin Feng exited the player booth and left the stage with his head lowered, the crowd finally recovered and suddenly exploded with cheers. He still had 83% health left, and Wind Howl's core god Tang Hao had already appeared in the individual competition. There was a big chance for a 1v3 in this group arena today. The crowd looked toward Wind Howl's player area. Who would be Wind Howl's group arena anchor? After several moments, the shouting in the stadium seemed to quiet down a bit as Wind Howl's anchor stood up. Lu Hao. Lu Hao had entered the All-Stars this season, meaning that his popularity wasn't bad. More importantly, this was City H, and 1 year prior this was still Lu Hao's home stadium. Much of the crowd today had come here in the past and watched his matches in person. Seeing Lu Hao come on stage, everyone hesitated. Yesterday's teammate becoming today's opponent, this was what players had to face. Yesterday's idol becoming today's obstacle, this was what fans had to face. At this sort of time, the crowd's mood would become very complex, and the hopes for a 1v3 were pulled back. This was the cruelty of the professional league, occasionally leaping out to bite. Lu Hao's steps were firm as he walked toward the stage, and he even paid tribute to the crowd, waving his hand toward them. As an away team player, this was practically asking for contempt, but Lu Hao evidently knew that his relationship with this crowd was different. His attitude actually won over quite a bit of the crowd. For this away team player, the home crowd actually gave him some applause. But Lu Hao was nowhere near as confident as he appeared. They'd already lost two players, and they'd only taken down 17% of the opponent's health. If Wind Howl wanted to win, he would have to accomplish a 1v3. Lu Hao didn't have such dreams. In his view, this was already a group arena that Wind Howl had no way of winning. To him, what he absolutely need to do is defeat Feng Rui, at least prevent the other side from completing a 1v3. Otherwise, it would simply be far too embarrassing for both him and Wind Howl as a whole. But this opponent still had 83% health. Lu Hao's mood was a bit heavy. As soon as he entered the player booth, that air of confidence and elegance he'd projected for the crowd instantly vanished. He carefully examined the state of the keyboard, mouse, and other such things before finally logging on. The third battle of the group arena began. Happy still had Feng Rui, but Wind Howl was already on their third and final player. Now that I'm here, if I don't 1v3, everyone will be so disappointed. Quote. When the battle began, Feng Rui already boldly expressed this. Ha, what a nice imagination. Lu Hao replied. But you're even more screwed. You'll have to 1v3 if you want to win this group arena, right? Feng Rui said. Lu Hao couldn't say anything. Just now, he had wanted to use his words to draw the crowd's attention to the question of whether or not Feng Rui could 1v3. With this, if he won and blocked Feng Rui's 1v3, he could be put in the role of a victor. Wind Howl would still lose the group arena, but everyone would put the blame on the first two players for not doing well, and he, who stopped Feng Rui's 1v3, would still have a bit of the air of a hero. But who would have expected Feng Rui to be so quick with his words? With one sentence, he exposed the truth of the difficult situation he was in. Just defeat Feng Rui? That was far from enough. Right now, he was the one who actually bore the heavy responsibility of completing a 1v3. Lu Hao's plan of diverting the crowd's attention hadn't even been implemented before Feng Rui shattered it. How about it? 1v3, have any confidence? I can say that I sure do. Feng Rui was still chatting away. Not only had Lu Hao's goal of redirection failed, Feng Rui was forcing everyone's attention onto this issue of 1v3 like crazy. He had confidence? Of course he did. 83% challenging 100%. Any player in this position would be extremely motivated. But Lu Hao, 100% against 283%? His heart was broken. 1v3. In your dreams. Lu Hao was helpless. He could only continue to present himself as someone who would stop a 1v3, and not someone who had to carry out a 1v3. I should say in your dreams. Or is it that you don't even have these dreams? If that's the case, I say, stop wasting time and just GG. Feng Rui said. Now that their conversation had reached this point, it was practically grinding away Lu Hao's spine. This was Happy's home stadium, but there were a number of die-hard Wind Howl fans following along with the team. They couldn't bear to see such mockery anymore. In such a situation, they could understand if Lu Hao lost the match, but ultimately everyone still had a sliver of hope for a miracle. Seeing Feng Rui's attack now, Wind Howl's fans instantly exploded. They hoped that their vice-captain Lu Hao, upon whom the team had heavily relied this season, would fight back for them, initiate a powerful counterattack 1v3 in this Happy Stadium, and humiliate the opponents. 1v3. Wind Howl's die-hard fans became fired up, cheering and yelling encouragement for their vice-captain. But instantly, their shouts overlapped with the 1v3 shouts from the Happy fans. Wind Howl's shouts were a bit more vigorous and exuberant, as they wished so desperately to see this humiliation. But with their shouts, Happy's fans couldn't sit still. The battle was already at this point and they still wanted to see a 1v3. Ridiculous. And so, Happy's shouts of 1v3 reached a new peak, attacking the Wind Howl fans. There were more of them, and so they quickly smothered the away team fans. But Wind Howl refused to yield. Even if their sound was drowned out, it wouldn't stop them from continuing to shout. This was their trust and hope in Lu Hao and Wind Howl. Lu Hao, sitting in the player booth, had no idea. If he did know, he probably wouldn't be moved. He would probably start crying from the motivation of these fans. 1v3. Can't everyone be logical here? How was he supposed to 1v3 under these conditions? The opponent's first player still had 83% health. WuxiaWorldAudio.com. Lu Hao didn't know, and so he didn't think that much right now. He only prepared to defeat Feng Rui, at least stop Happy from 1v3ing, and then he would definitely be understood by the fans. He had no idea that because of Feng Rui's trash talk, Wind Howl's fans had already expressed even higher expectations for him. As the two of them bickered through the chat, they were already approaching. Feng Rui continued to play dirty, and there was no sign of Boundless Sea. After watching 2 matches, Lu Hao had already grasped a few key points of Feng Rui's usage of this map. Right now, he paid close attention as he moved his character, choosing positions carefully. For now, he hadn't found Boundless Sea, but Feng Rui also couldn't find a good chance to attack. The two were at a stalemate. What's wrong? Still not attacking? Can't find an opportunity? If you continue to hide like this, watch out for a yellow card. Lu Hao also began a trash talk offensive. I'm right behind you, Feng Rui said. Ha, Lu Hao wasn't that naive. I really am right behind you. Feng Rui still said, behind you, behind you. Feng Rui suddenly channeled Huang Shaoshan and actually continued to spam these 2 words non-stop in the chat. Lu Hao was irritated, but the more irritated he was, the more he didn't dare to turn his character around. The more Feng Rui yelled this, the more he felt that the danger would come from anywhere but behind him. Lu Hao carefully controlled his character to move, looking left and right. But there was no sign of Boundless Sea, only Boundless Sea spam. Behind you, behind you. Lu Hao suddenly felt nervous. This guy, with his non-stop spamming, was he actually going to launch a sneak attack from behind, but using reverse psychology to make him too scared to look behind him? I'll take a look. Just one glance, fast, nothing will happen. Lu Hao once again carefully checked in front of him and to the left and right, and then with a sudden flick of his mouse, his camera view quickly spun around, scanning the surroundings behind him. No boundless sea. Lu Hao let out a breath, and his view quickly returned to the original position. Spirit reaches to the rainbow. At this moment, Boundless Sea attacked. His position had indeed been right behind Lu Hao's character. How could such a fast glance be enough to check behind all the possible spots of cover? Feng Rui, as soon as Lu Hao finished glancing around and let himself relax, launched his charged spirit reaches to the rainbow. Chi energy was silent, but the charged spirit reaches to the rainbow carried the character with it. The sound of the air colliding and splitting around him instantly resounded. Lu Hao instantly smelled that something was wrong. He didn't even bothering turning around again, he just directly had his character roll and dodge. With his fluctuating mood, going from tense to relaxed to suddenly tense again, his controls would naturally be unsteady. Feng Rui seized this one moment. The spirit reaches to the rainbow carried the chi and the character blasting forward. The rolling spellblade, Lu Hao's character Absent Sun, was directly hit by this attack. It was very rare to see blood from a chi master attack. Bright red sprayed from Absent Sun's mouth. This was typically the sign of heavy internal injuries. The attack didn't stop there. Feng Rui continued with his familiar flurry of brutal and powerful attacks, and Absent Sun's initial 17% lead was quickly erased. The cheers of the happy fans reached a new high. For the fans to put in the effort, they had to see the players' results. Only a beautiful performance could ultimately ignite the fans' support. Feng Rui slaughtered his way toward a 1v3. Lu Hao. Everyone saw how he was sent spinning in circles from Feng Rui's trash talk attack. Not openly mocking him too much was already a sign of his special relationship to this crowd. But even if the fans were nostalgic, Feng Rui was already continuing his trash talking. I said so many times that I was behind you, why didn't you believe me? How many times do you want me to say it? Give me a number. Feng Rui continued to enrich the contents of the chat channel. End chapter.
The King's Avatar, Chapter 1277, The Greatest Margin in History. Audio source, wuxia-world-audiobook.com. Chapter 1277, The Greatest Margin in History. Translator, Nomyami. Editor, Nomyami. Feng Rui's trash talk was brazenly thrown into the public chat, but his character Boundless Sea? After completing this combo of attacks and discovering that Lu Hao had adjusted fairly quickly, he didn't continue with the opportunity and instantly tried to retreat. Don't run. Lu Hao very heroically yelled this in the chat to show that he hadn't been beaten senseless by Feng Rui. As soon as his spellblade Absent Sun stood steady on the ground, he sent out an earthquake sword. Unfortunately, Boundless Sea had already rolled away, hiding himself behind a giant boulder over there. The opponent was the master of playing dirty, so of course Lu Hao didn't dare have Absent Sun directly chase him. His character moved horizontally first, pulling enough of a distance between them before charging towards that direction. As expected, Boundless Sea was indeed gathering chi behind that boulder, but when he saw that Lu Hao was prepared, he could only helplessly give up the attack. So careful. Scared. Feng Rui said in the chat. If you're a man then stop running. Lu Hao shouted. Can't. I'm very scared of you. Feng Rui's reply seemed quite refreshing, but anyone could tell that this was a joke. Words that might otherwise be welcoming to hear sounded mocking from him. And Feng Rui's actions followed his words. As he spoke, he had Boundless Sea move away. He clearly had no intentions of fighting Lu Hao directly. But even though he ran away, he didn't run too far away. He continued to circle around the boulder, as though prepared to go around and around with Lu Hao. This sort of technique was a bit cheap, but coming from a dirty player, everyone thought it was very reasonable. Lu Hao was sorely tempted to use a wave formation to cover that whole area, but he also feared that while he was casting, Boundless Sea would suddenly jump out and ambush him. After deliberating for a while, Absent Sun came forward, but he didn't chase. He only crept a bit closer to the rock, checking his left and the right, his hand on his short sword, ready to act at a moment's notice. Lu Hao was prepared to sit here and wait for his target. Whether Fang Rui continued to circle around clockwise, or suddenly reverse and go counterclockwise, he would just wait here. But he waited, and there was no trace of Boundless Sea. Fang Rui's trash talk popped up in the match channel yet again. Huh? What's going on? How come you're not chasing me? Didn't you tell me not to run? Lu Hao felt like spitting blood. This guy, did he just leave after circling around the boulder? And now, had he already circled around behind him? Lu Hao was just about to turn around in a hurry, but in that instant, he was suddenly alert. He had been carefully watching his left and the right. He felt that in this short span of time, there was no way that Fang Rui could have controlled Boundless Sea to circle behind him without his noticing. He almost fooled me. Lu Hao huffed a breath. But he couldn't guess Fang Rui's plans right now. Was he trying to use his words to paralyze him, and actually taking a very long path to circle around him? Or was he still hiding behind that boulder, prepared to launch an attack on him? Lu Hao couldn't wait around like this forever. He had Absent Sun move back away from the boulder, using the same strategy as before to pull apart the distance, and then use this increased field of view to check behind the boulder. He immediately saw that indeed, Boundless Sea was hiding right behind the boulder, his hands cupped before him, gathering chi again, waiting to sneak attack. This bastard! Lu Hao was furious. This was an exact repeat of what had just happened before. Good thing he stayed calm, otherwise who knew what could have happened. Fang Rui. His same strategy was once again broken by the opponent. He simply tossed a, "Huh, you found me again," into the chat, and then twisted and continued to circle clockwise around the boulder. Lu Hao was about to go crazy. Who the fuck designed this map? Throwing this stupid goddamned rock right here. It gives opportunities to these kinds of guys, and the quality of matches goes way down. Of course Lu Hao thought this way, but the live audience was swimming in a sea of amusement. Perhaps this match wasn't thrilling or intense to draw people in, but they burst into laughter watching this teasing situation. And now, Fang Rui was doing the same thing for the third time. How would Lu Hao respond? Absent Sun raised his short sword and began to cast electric wave formation. Fang Rui's Boundless Sea had circled around behind the boulder, meaning that he, too, could only guess at Lu Hao's actions. Only in the final instant of a wave formation cast was there any sound, and this time, Lu Hao bet that the opponent wouldn't anticipate this. His bet was correct. Fang Rui's Boundless Sea didn't reveal himself. The accumulated electricity on Absent Sun's sword ultimately condensed into spheres on the surface of the boulder before him. By the time the zapping sounds were audible, the electric sphere were already formed. With a flash, they were released, flowing all around. If there was a target, they would automatically lock on. If not, they would wander about freely. Lu Hao was, after all, a spellblade who had entered the All-Stars. Even if he didn't see the target, from the flow of electricity he could draw many conclusions. No target. Lu Hao was shocked. This meant that Boundless Sea wasn't in range for the wave formation, then his position now, it must be. Liu Hao's mind quickly outlined the range of electric wave formation. His gaze settled on the scenery in front of him, and Absent Sun rushed forward. His view widened as he pulled away, and indeed there was no sign of Boundless Sea, but there, behind the boulder, there was a crack just large enough to fit one person, looking like a collection of shadows. Liu Hao's pupil contracted. As an expert spellblade, he was very clear on the quirks of all the spellblade skills. If there was such a crack in range of an electric wave formation, there was a high chance that a character could hide there and avoid damage. Liu Hao wasn't entirely unfamiliar with this map, but did this boulder really hide such a detail? Liu Hao wasn't sure. But now, he saw this, and immediately guessed that Boundless Sea must be right there. Unfortunately, it was already too late. This time, he hadn't made any preparations or calculated out any space before having Absent Sun charge forward to check behind the boulder. WuxRWorldAudio.com. Seeing that crack, in the time it took for his brain to click and flash through these thoughts, Fang Rui's Boundless Sea had already attacked. Liu Hao had guessed correctly. Boundless Sea was right there. Landmine quake. Only Fang Rui's hands exposed themselves from the crack, and by the time they were exposed they'd already slapped against the ground. Qi spread along the earth, and Absent Sun had no time to dodge and was sent flying into the air. Boundless Sea no longer played dirty, shooting out like an arrow, his body like wind, carrying Qi and slamming into Absent Sun's body. Another combo of powerful attacks. Absent Sun's health slid downwards, and the happy fans in the crowd whooshed alive with applause. 1v3. They continued to scream, and Wind Howl's fans had already shut their mouths. The vice-captain in whom they trusted and believed didn't seem to stand much of a chance against this dirty-playing Fang Rui. This was entirely like the first and second battles, with Fang Rui firmly in control of the battle rhythm. If this continued, it wouldn't even be a question of victory, it would be. This time, by how large of a margin would Fang Rui win this 1v3? Up until now, Boundless Sea hadn't even lost any health yet in this third battle, while Absent Sun's health had plummeted. Boundless Sea's 83% health was now in the lead. And completing a 1v3 also often involved the problem of running out of mana, but it seemed that Boundless Sea was fine on that end as well. Fang Rui's attacks were simply too efficient. When he attacked, his attacks were always effective, so his mana usage was very efficient. He had plenty of mana left to finish this battle. But for the audience, all they cared about was victory. They couldn't care about such details right now. Those in the live crowd, those watching online, they watched as Fang Rui went back and forth with his harassment, ultimately grinding Liu Hao's Absent Sun to death. Liu Hao did display some of the skill befitting an all-star, taking away 15% of Boundless Sea's health, a better performance than the previous two Wind Howl players, but that was all. 1v3 completed, 32% health lost. This was the final answer Fang Rui gave. The stadium hollered and cheered, not resting even as Fang Rui came down off stage and returned to his seat in Happy's player area. 1v3. Happy's Tangro had once wanted to do this, and failed, but now, her teammate Fang Rui accomplished it. Many of the reporters at the stadium were so excited they couldn't even sit still. They could hardly wait for the match to finish, they wanted desperately to interview right there. But of course they knew that this was impossible, so most reporters calmed down, flipping through their data and making preparations for the interviews post-match. In the midst of this, Chang Jian of Esports Home, after looking through every single 1v3 in 10 years of group arena matches, he finally confirmed that Fang Rui had set a new record. The record for the greatest margin in a 1v3 victory. 32% health lost. This result beat out the previous record set by Wang Jieqi in Season 4, 52% health lost by a solid 20%. It had to be emphasized was that Fang Rui was the first to appear in the group arena. With 32% health, he defeated 3 opponents at 100% health. And Wang Jieqi at the time had been third in the group arena, the anchor. Even though the total reversal had been more exciting, no matter what, he was inferior both in terms of how much health he knocked away and in terms of how much he had remaining. Fang Rui's record here was solid gold. It would be very, very difficult to surpass. And the method he used to set this record was also worth remembering. He hadn't used an overwhelming advantage to slaughter the opponents all the way until the end. These 3 battles had all taken some time, they'd been played rather slowly. Fang Rui played dirty to create an abnormal efficiency. This sort of attack efficiency wasn't something that could be replicated by those hard-hitting players. When they directly collided with their opponents, there was inevitably some exchange, and the health that they ultimately sacrificed wouldn't be so low. Playing dirty, the style that had received so many cold gazes, finally entered the history books with this record. History's greatest margin of victory for a 1v3 was created by playing dirty. This was Fang Rui's victory, and a victory for the dirty playstyle he'd persisted in using even after changing classes to Chi Master. End chapter. The King's Avatar. Chapter 1278. Mid-match break. Wind Howl. Audio source: wuxia-world-audiobook.com. Chapter 1278. Mid-match break. Wind Howl. Translator: Nomyami. Editor: Nomyami. A historic record. The majority of people who cared about this record were reporters. The viewers cared more about the feeling of a 10-0. Happy just need to win the upcoming team competition. The 1v3 chants in the group arena were replaced by 10-0s. The loyal fans who followed Wind Howl all the way to their away game were in low spirits. Lu Hao being dominated by Fang Rui wasn't a small blow to them. They had originally been hoping for Lu Hao to turn the tables with an astonishing 1v3 and show them their team's might. But they couldn't see any sort of fighting spirit in their vice-captain. Lu Hao looked completely lost facing Fang Rui's dirty tricks. Wind Howl's fans were quiet, very quiet. Seeing the excited cheers from Happy's fans, they felt an unpleasant taste in their mouths. This exhilaration should have belonged to them. Because Fang Rui, didn't he used to be part of Team Wind Howl? Despite having switched classes to a Chi Master, his style was still very familiar to Wind Howl's loyal fans. This was someone who had used to bring him joy, and now the Wind Howl banners created by the fans always flew in the air whether it was Wind Howl's home or away game, but right now, it seemed to be thrown aside, drooping in disappointment. Wind Howl's flag bearer looked dispirited. The others weren't worried about him though, because they knew that Fang Rui had been this person's favorite player. Fang Rui had been hard for him, and now, seeing Fang Rui complete a 1v3 against Wind Howl produced a feeling he couldn't describe with words. How would the upcoming team competition go? Team Wind Howl's loyal fans were unexpectedly feeling doubtful towards their own team. Their captain and core, Tang Hao. The new generation Zhao Yuzhe who they had high hopes for. Lin Feng who they wanted to inherit Doubtful Demon. The supervalue Lu Hao who the team had gotten at an amazing price. In the individual competition and group arena, they seemed to have been crushed by opponents on an entirely different level than them. With these people making up the team, how could they hope to beat Happy? Wind Howl's teamwork wasn't anything too praiseworthy. Wind Howl's own fans knew this point better than anyone else. As for Happy, starting from round 9, their team had yet to lose a single round. Was Happy a team their Wind Howl could beat? The fans were doubtful that their team could win this match, doubtful of their team's claim to be the champions this season. Windhowl's win record this season wasn't as stable as last season's. Didn't the team say they would form an all-new team more compatible than before after letting Fang Rui go? An all-new team. Windhowl could see it. The team had given up on the dirty style. The dirty tricks from before had turned into a more aggressive offensive. Perhaps this style was more like a champion's. Apart from Blue Rain's deviation from the norm, the other champion teams had all given off this sort of grand aura. Windhowl was trying hard to construct this aura, but did it really fit them? The former criminal partners had never considered themselves as the strongest duo in the alliance, but the fans always felt steady with them there. No matter how much of a criss the team was in, they would always be confident about their team. But now, the team's win record was worse than last season's. The team was still within the playoff zone, but how could they not be nervous about why? The current Windhowl made him feel like there was something missing. This sort of mystery feeling really didn't feel good. Windhowl's most loyal fans were pacing back and forth. Windhowl's players were also in low spirits. In the individual competition, their core player Tang Hao was crushed by Yishu, and then their other two players lost as well. In the group arena, the team sent 3 strong players, but their former teammate Fang Rui took all of them down with just 2/3 of his health. How humiliating. The player you let go just casually cleaned up 3 players you had cultivated with the utmost care. Right now, the first thoughts that came to their mind were classic idioms like, "have eyes but cannot see," or "buying a wooden box and returning the pearls." Team Windhowl's players felt this embarrassment the most. What should they do? Beating their opponents would obviously be the greatest retaliation. However, Windhowl's players had been beaten one after the other. It seemed like they couldn't break free from their losses. Only the remarring second-string players on the side busily circling around and around. What's going on? Have you guys gone stupid from losing? Finally, someone spoke up. Ruin Yongbin, Windhowl's cleric. Healers were never replaced in any team, so their status in the team was always relatively high. In addition to healers being rarely transferred, healers almost always held seniority. Ruin Yongbin had been a part of Team Windhowl for nearly 6 years. He had joined the team alongside Fang Rui. When Fang Rui left, Ruin Yongbin became Team Windhowl's most senior member. He was the type of player who obeyed orders and didn't like to talk too much. However, seeing how the team's morale had been shaken and how the main players all looked like they had been swatted down like flies, he couldn't resist it anymore and finally spoke out. Healers were only needed in the team competition, so the outcome of the individual rounds never impacted him as much as the others. They could always maintain a rational mind and watch from afar the morale of their teammates rise up and down in the individual rounds. As a result, for the most important team competition, a level-headed healer could always act as a stabilizing force for the team. But unfortunately, Ruin Yongbin spoke too rarely in Windhowl. He didn't fully utilize the special existence brought by his class's speciality. Everyone looked at him when he suddenly spoke out. WuxaWorldAudio.com. Their eyes were completely filled with confusion. They didn't look like they had been enlightened in any way. The team competition hasn't been fought yet. Half the points are waiting to be taken by us. We can do this. Ruin Yongbin tried his best to say words that he wasn't used to. Anyone could say this though. The logic was obvious. What was needed was a wake-up call to break apart the doubt formed in the players during the individual rounds. However, Ruin Yongbin's wake-up call didn't have enough power behind it. He was talking, and everyone was looking at him, but morale. Their morale hadn't been ignited. Only Lu Hao clapped his hands and squeezed out a smile. Yongbin, you're right. The match isn't over yet. We still have 5 points to take. Why does everyone look like we've already lost? Lu Hao was the vice-captain. His popularity among the fans this season wasn't bad. His relations with other people in the team weren't bad either. His words were clearly more effective than Ruin Yongbin's. Ruin Yongbin let out a sigh of relief and looked at Lu Hao with gratitude. He was glad that their vice-captain could maintain a level head and look at the match with reason. Lu Hao had a smile filled with reason on the surface, but inside, he was feeling extremely annoyed. After walking off stage, he saw the expressions of his teammates and the silence from Wind Howl's loyal fans and knew his performance had disgusted quite a few people. However, Lu Hao's strength was his practically cruel ability to fake it. He could cover his true feelings well and then push the most suitable attitude for the situation onto the surface. As a result, he had been depressed and silent along with the other players. But when Ruin Yongbin spoke out while the others didn't respond, he could force himself and wake himself up. He acted like a vice-captain and started encouraging the others following Ruin Yongbin's example. Look, our fans who traveled so far to support us are feeling bitter and in low spirits. How could we disappoint them? Everyone, hurry up and get your spirits up. Let's get our Wind Howl's banner flying into the air again. We lost quite a few points, but it's just 5 points. Next, if we win just this upcoming team competition, we can win 5 points. Then, the score will be 5-5. Is that a loss? No. If the away team wins 5 points, shouldn't that be considered a win? Right now, we still have a chance to win. Lu Hao put up his thumbs and emphasized that they just need to win this team competition. What bullshit. Wind Howl's captain, Tang Hao, suddenly interrupted Lu Hao very rudely. Let alone 5 points, if we can win even 1 more point, we can't give it up. Tang Hao grit his teeth. Captain Tang is right, we can't back down even if it was just 1 point. Lu Hao didn't appear to be unhappy with Tang Hao interrupting him. Instead, he immediately agreed with Tang Hao. Tang Hao had raised the team's morale to the peak. Let's go beat them. Tang Hao shouted. Don't tell me you're willing to let a certain someone slap our faces. It was obvious who he was pointing to. Taking a former hero of Wind Howl and pinning him as the enemy was a bit ugly. When an old veteran of the team like Ruin Yongbin heard these words, his expression turned unnatural. Ling Jingyan and Fang Rui had left the team peacefully, but how could those inside the team not understand? This had nothing to do with what was right or wrong. It was the choice for the team to grow. For this choice, the team should feel sympathy for those that had been given up. Team Wind Howl shouldn't have these negative feelings towards them. Fang Rui had won the group arena and had embarrassed Wind Howl, but this was competition. There was only victory. Nothing else mattered. It wasn't like they could hope that Fang Rui would throw the match for them. Tang Hao, an adorned despiser, made Ruin Yongbin feel quite unhappy. But what about the other players? Zhao Yuzhe, Lin Feng. They had just been humiliated by Fang Rui. Tang Hao's out-of-line attitude had ignited their fighting spirits. End chapter.